This conference will now be recorded.
So welcome everybody to today's Answer Cancer High Risk Recurrent and Advanced Prostate Cancer Virtual Group. Today, meaning the 11th of February. This is our earlier Tuesday meeting. And we have few people here, everybody's been here before, so I'm just going to read through my list of people. We've got Jake, Dennis Correa, Jay Mills, Les Shelderup, Sylvester Mann, Dennis McGuire, Ken Anderson, Jerry Pelfrey, and Larry Fish. Is there anybody whose name I did not call? Okay. No Peter and no Len so far today. We'll see if they show up. Okay. All right. Well, we'll dive right in. Maybe we'll even get a shorter meeting than usual. That would be a bonus. Jake, anything you'd like to talk about today?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. Dennis, Dennis Correa?
No, thank you, Rick.
No, okay. Jay Mills, anything that you'd like to raise today?
No, not today. I'm good.
Okay. Okay, I hope somebody's got something. Les Shelderup, anything for you today?
Today, thank you much, Rick.
Okay. Sylvester, anything for you?
No, thank you.
Dennis McGuire, anything for you?
I'll break the trend.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll give a quick update. I met with my oncologist last week.
Oh, good. Okay. Ken, yeah, you have something you got to bring us up to date.
Yeah, I can do that.
Bring me up to date. Jerry Pelfrey, anything for you today?
I've got two short questions.
Okay, you got them. Larry Fish, anything for you?
Nothing yet. Thursday I have blood tests, and a week I have an appointment back at Sloan based on the blood test. If something changes Monday night, I'll be talking. Otherwise, not. Good now.
Well, you'll be telling us that nothing's changed, so you'll be talking either way.
But I won't need
You may not need time.
yeah.
Well, we still like that. We can give you time just to tell you that we're very happy for you.
Thank you.
And Peter Monaco, how are you? Anything that you'd like to talk about tonight?
I'll give a brief update, Rick.
That sounds good.
Nothing significant.
Okay. Well, I had one issue that I wanted to just bring your attention to, but it's probably going to get caught up in our discussion with Ken Anderson. So if it does not, for any reason, we'll come back to it. So why don't we kick off right now with Dennis McGuire and find out how your discussion went with your oncologist.
Yeah, so Friday, I met with Dr. Morris at Sloan Kettering. We were supposed to have the results of the genetic sequencing available, but they were not ready, which was disappointing.
Sure.
I did a PET scan, so I should have those results later this week. And then we talked about, so just a little background before we talk about my options. So I've been on Xtandi for 2 years, and I've started to fail on Xtandi over the last 6 months, and my PSA is now 11. I think the doubling time is 3 to 4 months. So I have to do something. The 4 options that Dr. Morris put on the table were a second round of chemo. I've already had docetaxel. That was 4 years ago. Zytiga. And then there are 2 clinical trials that are possibilities. One is a glucocorticoid receptor trial. It's a phase 1. And another one is it is a new form of chemotherapy. It's called IMMU-132. And I think it's related to TROP2. Didn't do a lot of research on that one yet. So I think those are the 4 options. I'd like to know if others on the phone know of any other options. I think decision point will be after we see the scans to find out if there's been any progression on the scans, and then also the final results of the genetic testing.
When was the last time that they did a biopsy? Was a biopsy done for the genomic sequencing, or did they do that from blood, Dennis?
No, it was a biopsy, and that was early November. And they took it from a metastatic lesion in my pelvic lymph node.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pelvic lymph node.
So that's what we're waiting for.
And was the result of that biopsy that your disease was still considered to be adenocarcinoma?
Yes.
Okay,
No change from that. The quick analysis of that, it was the same as what we had at diagnosis.
Okay. There's a reason that I ask, which is that I've been reading recently confirmation of something that we kind of knew, which is that long-term use of enzalutamide may result in the disease morphing into something that looks more like small cell or neuroendocrine-like disease, which is what happened to Foodie. Foodie had got 4.5 years out of enzalutamide. However, when it failed and he was biopsied, his disease didn't look like adenocarcinoma anymore. And so the reason I checked with you is just to make sure that they still consider your disease to be adenocarcinoma, because that might also narrow the options. I do have some thoughts, but since there are some other people that are, maybe in a similar boat, I want to throw it out. I also, I'm wondering what this glucocorticoid receptor trial is, and what it's addressing, what it's trying to do. Unfortunately, Len isn't on the line yet, and he may well know more about that, but it's not anything that I've seen. The IMMU-122 also is not familiar to me. That's just a code for a drug. So again, without looking it up, I don't really know what that's about either. Can you tell us any more about either of these 2 trials?
Yeah, based on what I know, what Morris told me and what I've seen on Sloan's website on the glucocorticoid receptor, they believe that prostate cancer cells have a glucocorticoid receptor, and this would be an inhibitor to the receptor.
Okay.
What makes me a little nervous is that it is phase 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, phase 1 is always a pain in the butt. I mean, there's no way you can do a phase 1 trial if you're in Wisconsin.
Oh, well, they have actually, I think that one is also at Wisconsin. They're participating.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is that if they inhibit that glucocorticoid receptor, that it could inhibit the replication of the cells and the growth of the cells. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay.
It's also can be added to Xtandi. So those patients that are joining that trial stay on Xtandi.
Okay. And even if you've stopped responding to Xtandi as you have?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And do you know anything about this IMMU 132?
The little bit that I've seen, and as it was discussed, is that it is a form of chemotherapy, and it targets a TROP2 protein.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Certainly above my pay grade. Well, let me, before I give you my 2 cents, let me throw it open to anybody that would like to talk with Dennis and give him their thoughts on what their next step might be, or if they know of any other alternatives for situation where you've been on chemo, you've been through a second-line anti-androgen that you got a couple of years out of, and now that's beginning to fail. Anyone want to speak up?
This is Jake. I was on Xtandi for about 30 months and it stopped working. And then I tried abiraterone. In my case, it did not work. There is a very small percentage of people who respond to Abby after NZ, but you may be part of that percentage. You know, as Rick mentions oftentimes, it may be worthwhile asking for an ARV7 test to see if it would even be feasible for you.
Well, I would just interrupt there, Jake. I don't think ARV7 is relevant, otherwise you wouldn't have responded to the enzalutamide for 2 years.
Well, okay. Have you had a genomic test?
He's getting one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting an update on
From
genomic
Foundation or who?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Memorial Sloan Kettering's in-house one.
Okay.
Len just arrived. Welcome, Len.
Hi, Len.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Len.
Hopefully,
Len,
hopefully the genomic test will identify if you have any new mutations that you've developed since you started the enzalutamide.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
Len, I just want to update you on Dennis McGuire.
Okay.
Although I know you talked to Dennis, so you may be up to date. Are you up to date?
No, not since his last visit to Dr. Morris.
Okay, well, Dr. Morris, in a nutshell, the sequencing wasn't ready yet, which was a little disappointing. Dennis did a few more tests, scans, and Dr. Morris is talking about some alternatives. Another round of chemo, although I did not ask Dennis. I should have done. I didn't ask Dennis with what. Dennis, what was, did he say what he would use in this round of chemo?
Well, I did docetaxel at the outset of my diagnosis 4.5 years ago. He believes that either docetaxel or cabazitaxel, if I got that pronunciation right.
Sure.
So either one.
Okay. So he's offering, he's suggesting second round of chemo, abiraterone, a trial that addresses a glucocorticoid receptor on the prostate cell, and another trial using some type of chemotherapy called IMMU-132. I just Googled that. I don't find much. It addresses the TROP gene, but I don't know. Oh, did you say gene or protein?
I thought it was a protein. I'm not certain.
Okay. So now that we have our buff in here, we'll get to the bottom of it. But that, and so I've just asked folks what they might do, and then we'll come back and maybe tidy up a little bit.
Yeah, I can add a
anyone
little
else?
bit, Rick. I can add a little bit. My computer
Yes,
froze up,
please.
so I couldn't discuss it. I got to tell you, Dennis, you and I are in about the same spot. I was going to jump in prior to Jake, but I couldn't because of the freeze up of my computer. In my recent reply, and I got to say we're pretty close. I'm like 3.5, you're like 4.5. I only got like 1 month out of enzalutamide, and I gave it a good try, 5.5, almost 5 months. And it worked for a little bit and then stopped. So my particular place, the place I'm at the moment, is either to do cabazitaxel or to start another, second line drug, which is abiraterone. And my recent email from Paul Korn was to start abiraterone prior to doing cabazitaxel. He did state that even though this trial, which Rick was great to send me, the CARD trial showed overall survival was a little better by doing cabazitaxel prior to doing a second line treatment like abiraterone after enzalutamide. He said he wasn't 100% sure that the sequencing of those two drugs would be better doing the cabazitaxel prior to abiraterone. So he did leave it up to me to choose, but he said at the end that I might be cutting off a couple toes if I did it the other way around, that is cabazitaxel first. So at least for me, I'm gonna, even though I did fail enzalutamide, Xtandi, I'm gonna go ahead and move forward with Abby. So
Okay.
if you want to chat more though, Dennis, after the meeting, we can, of course.
Yeah, and we'll come back to dissect that a little bit more with you, Ken. But Dennis, have you looked at the video where Dr. Morgans is talking to Dr. Cora Sternberg about the CARD trial?
I do want to do that, but I have not done it.
Do you have the link for it? I think I might have included it. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can find it. She's at Northwestern.
Dr. Morgans is at Northwestern. Dr. Sternberg, who was being interviewed, is at Weill Cornell.
Okay.
Are you online or are you on the phone? You're on the phone, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the phone.
Okay, well, we will, did I mention it in this? Does anybody have my
Hey, Rick,
thing?
I can send it to him, Rick. I have it.
Oh, you have it? Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
if
I
you,
have it. I'll send it to him.
oh, that'd be great. Thanks, if you could. I thought I might have mentioned it in this week's reminder, but possibly not. But it was something that Len pointed out to me, and I watched it. Len, what are your thoughts on this cabazitaxel versus a second-line anti-androgen? Would you do it for yourself?
Well, yeah, in this case, I would, because the evidence seems to be that cabazitaxel works better after the failure of a second line anti-androgen or androgen blocker, like enzalutamide or abiraterone, whichever one comes first doesn't matter. If you try and follow it with another one, you don't do as well in the trial as you would do if you went to cabazitaxel instead. And that's for guys who have previously been treated with docetaxel, which I think is the case for both Dennis and Ken.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a trial is like perfect for them as a model. Of course, you know, it's their choice.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And Ken, why do you think, what was Paul Korn's reasoning that you'd be like cutting a couple of toes off?
I sent you his reply, and it basically stated that it was like a 1 month down. Like it was, my own was on enzalutamide, even though it worked for 1 month. He was, in his mind, I don't think he considered that a good representation of using the drug very long. So he honestly thought enzalutamide would work for me for a long time, would lower my testosterone, would give me a good result, and he was surprised that it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, he's thinking Abby is the next choice. So I don't know that that would be his recommendation for everyone. He did say he was very familiar with the card trial, and they discussed it internally at MD Anderson in detail.
Okay.
So, just in my particular case, he recommended, sequencing using abiraterone first. Go ahead, Len.
Yeah, I forgot. Ken's case is kind of unique in that he responded well at first to enzalutamide and then very quickly stopped responding. It's not your typical pattern like Dennis had, being on enzalutamide for, I think, a few years and then failing. Dennis is maybe a more closer match to the card trial than Ken. So I can understand why Paul wanted to go with abiraterone.
And we should add, for those of you who don't know and you're wondering, asking yourself the question, and I don't want to take the steam out of Ken's sales, but Ken, tell the folks whether you were ARV7 positive or negative.
Well, I thought I did last week, no?
Can't remember.
Oh. No, well, it was a pretty, I mean, pretty strong push by Rick to get it done, and I did, I was gonna do it through John Hopkins, and then he insisted, which I don't know, I did it through um, Genomic, and they came back with a negative result, and Paul knows that as well, so that may come into play as to which direction he wants me to go. So I ended up being ARV7 negative, but there are some other AR genes that come into play which may also be causing enzalutamide not to work for me.
Sure.
there's a lot of different, I mean, it's not just the ARV7.
Right.
So
So let's go back to Dennis. Dennis, I sort of feel at some level we're just confusing you because, you know, on the one hand we're saying, well, there's evidence that the Jevtana would work, the cabazitaxel would work. On the other hand, we've got a really terrific GU med-onc that we love, who's suggesting to Ken that he sequence this with abiraterone. One thing that occurs to me, and I think I'd be asking Morris this, is there any possibility that the Jevtana, well, first of all, I'd want to ascertain with him whether he would recommend docetaxel or cabazitaxel. I mean, I think if it were me personally, I probably would go with the cabazitaxel only because that's what the CARD trial used and also because it's got a lower side effect profile. And there are men who have had, that we've known of, who have had 60 or more treatments with cabazitaxel. So it's well tolerated in some men, not all men. So I'd ask him, you know, which of those he thinks would be better, and then you know, I think I would probably ask him, well, what would he do? You know, what does he recommend? He can lay out the choices for you, but he's the educated mind here, and I'd get him to order the preferences. I probably would drop the phase 1 trial just because it's a phase 1 trial, even though you can do it locally in Madison. Jake was kind enough to post the link to that trial so we can look at it a little bit later. But it's still a phase 1 trial, which is a real, it's just a pain for participants, a phase 1 trial. So much blood work and, you know, all the rest of it.
Is it just me? I don't see anything in the chat box.
no, neither do I.
Because you came on later. So you don't see the chat box from before you arrived. So we have to post it again. And I don't know. Okay, Jake will put it in again for you.
Thanks, Jake.
Sure.
So, but you know, you're raising a really good issue, Dennis. You're raising a really good issue because why is it so good? Because it's facing at least 2 of our guys right now, and I'm sure it's going to face a bunch more of our guys. Anybody else other than Ken and Jake would like to contribute to this discussion?
I do want to point out that one trial that I posted, I think there are several for the IMMU 132. This one is in conjunction with, I believe, enzalutamide or something else. Did they tell you it would be done in conjunction with something else, Dennis? So I may not have posted the correct link, is why I'm asking.
No, I don't think it has to be with enzalutamide. I think it has to be, I think if I remember correctly, it has to be after one of the androgen treatments.
Dennis, didn't you just say though that you could take it with enzalutamide?
No, that was the glucocorticoid receptor.
Ah, okay, forgive me.
Yeah,
and you are right. It was for people who have progressed after combination enzalutamide or abiraterone or an ARN 509 abiraterone. So it's not done in conjunction with them. It's after you progressed on those.
Yeah, and I believe that one is also phase 1 or phase 1B, which I'm not sure what the difference is.
Okay. So, any other input?
In any case, just to sum it up, I think before we make a decision, it's going to be looking at the genetic sequencing and then also looking at the results of the PET scan to see if there's been any progression of the disease.
Sure. I mean, the one thing I would say is that, and this came up recently, that the type of drugs that are going to be pointed out by the sequencing, the genomic sequencing, are going to be more specialized and less tested. And so if there are drugs out there that we think may work, like in your case, abiraterone, acetate, or cabazitaxel, and it might be worth looking at those and using those first before turning to some of these specialty drugs. Because both the abiraterone and the cabazitaxel may produce results. I mean, I can tell you that in people that I've known who, and I'm really repeating what Jake said, we've known a couple of people that have gone from abiraterone, from enzalutamide to abiraterone and abiraterone to enzalutamide, and we really don't see more than about 6 to 8 months in the best case. So the abiraterone is more of a short-term solution. I mean, this is not true for somebody like Ken, because what's going on with Ken seems to be something different. But for somebody like yourself, I would say 6 to 8 months. Now, I think from the evidence, the Jevtana, the cabazitaxel is probably the best, but it's up to you. I mean, and please do keep us posted on what Morris says.
I would second that.
Yeah, absolutely, I will. I mean, if I had to decide today, which I don't, fortunately, I would probably go Zytiga just because of the toxicity of the chemo. I mean, it does kind of wipe you out.
You know, you don't know, but I can tell you that we've had guys take Jevtana and they've just waltzed through it. We've had some guys who haven't done well at all, but we've had some guys that it's barely affected.
Can I ask the question, Rick?
Sure.
You know, Dennis, how'd you do on docetaxel? I'm just curious.
I did okay. I did have one episode early on of neutropenia. My white bloods got really low, and I got a fever. But then they put me on Neulasta, and that seemed to help going forward.
Did you notice a decline? Did you notice a decline in PSA along the way?
Oh yeah, it definitely worked. Yeah, I responded to it pretty well.
Well, that's all good.
Yeah, I think the Lupron alone brought my PSA from like 200 down to 50, and then on the docetaxel I went down to like I think close to 1.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you when I first started docetaxel, I got the shingles. I was so concerned about starting one of these, chemo drugs. But the drugs that we take today that are even like enzalutamide are considered chemo. So they're just pill form, not IV form. So I would just say that I would agree with Rick, even though Saturday or Sunday when he sent me this card trial and I read through it, I did go mental. I mean, thinking that, another chemo drug, an IV type drug was going to be the next choice. But but I would say give it some consideration because I do believe it's not as bad as, docetaxel. And hopefully for you and I, because I believe it's in my future as well, we can sail through it and it'll buy 10 to who knows how many months.
Yeah.
So,
What just while we're on that topic, why is cabazitaxel have lighter side effects?
that'd be a question for Rick. Is it
Well,
dosage or is it just a different kind of a taxane-based chemo?
it's a second generation taxane-based chemo that was developed by Sanofi around, I think it was introduced about 2011 or 2012. And it was specifically introduced to result in a lower side effect. It was developed to produce a lower side effect profile. So, I mean, I can't tell you why it has that, but it definitely is. It's kind of like a docetaxel light, and it's usually supposed to be used after docetaxel, although on some occasions it is used as the first line.
And the mechanism of action is just stopping cells from dividing, those rapidly cells from dividing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Len?
Glenn's shaking his head yes.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. They're in the same class of drug. They destroy the most rapidly dividing cells in your body, which, among other cells, includes the cancer cells.
right.
And I had posted a blog on ancan.org not too long ago that indicated guys preferred cabazitaxel over docetaxel. I believe this study involved crossover. So one group started with docetaxel, the other group started with cabazitaxel, and then they crossed over at some point. So the guys were able to distinguish how they felt on each drug, and something like 2/3 to 3/4 preferred the cabazitaxel. It does, yeah. So it does have a softer, easier side effect profile.
Hi, it's Larry.
Hi, Larry.
Hey, Ken. You're kind of, I'm kind of on the same trajectory that you're on, maybe a little behind you. As I'm due to start Zytiga or something else shortly, but I also came in with that 200, extremely high PSA metastasis already. And then I did like a short course of docetaxel that didn't go very well, and stopped and went to Lupron and Casodex. And anyway, I'm not going to go through my history. What I was thinking about is you were talking about the 4 options that Dr. Morris, I see Dr. Audio at Sloan also. The 2 trials he talked about, the phase 1, which seems pretty, guessworky, and did he just are these 2 Sloan trials, or are these trials somewhere else?
Yeah, it's Dennis McGuire. They are both Sloan trials.
So then what I was wondering is if they explored, other similar trials, because that are, by the way, quite complex right now. I used to be sort of easier to read trials, and now I find it more difficult and they're more complex. And but even if I did a 200-mile radius, but if you do even a 50-mile radius, because I wanted to include Dana-Farber and John Hopkins, and there are just a lot of different trials that are in different phases going on. And I wonder if Sloan is tied into them and might want to consider, which ones might be also options for you. Because it seems like you're only offering you really one useful one. I don't know how.
Well, that you raise a very good point, and my experience with 3 hospitals and 3 very good oncologists is they're going to push you toward their clinical trial. And I have yet to find an oncologist that has recommended a trial outside of their hospital.
Yeah, I had the same kind of experience, but when I took a look at trials and came up with a few I thought were interesting, and I mentioned them to my doctor, she acknowledged that she knew about those and that she didn't recommend them specifically for me at this point because she thought my PSA had to be over 2.0 at that point. Maybe now you can
Yeah.
get it over 1.0, but it's still they prefer 2.0 and like a more recent scan and a biopsy. So I'm not exactly there at this moment, although I might be heading there shortly. When I bring them up, I discuss them, and if 1 or 2 sounded interesting to me, that was a year ago. Things have progressed in terms of trials. There's so much going on. I don't even know, what to suggest. But I would be willing to go to Hopkins or to Dana-Farber, and very often Sloan may not be the lead researcher, but Sloan is a site that's acceptable for trials. And I don't know if there's any value, but if you do a little research or somebody does come up with something that seems appropriate for where you're at, if they would entertain that and discuss it. Just an idea I was thinking because I'm sort of thinking the same way.
Dennis,
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think the biggest challenge there is, sequencing. Do you go with the proven drug now, or do you go with the clinical trial, and if those don't work, then you go with the proven drug?
Well, how long would it be before you knew? I mean, that's another question.
Yeah, exactly.
question I have for you is,
That's all. That was all I wanted to discuss. Thanks.
do you plan to review these 4 options with Dr. Lang?
Yes. I'm meeting with Dr. Lang at Wisconsin on the 25th,
Okay.
and we should have everything in hand with the PET scan results and the genetics.
So a couple of things there. You might just check in and see what other trials Wisconsin has beyond the IMMU 132, because they may have some other trials that were not presented to you. This also goes to the point we were just discussing with Larry. I mean, there may be other trials within a radius of Madison that might be, I mean, there may be trials at Northwestern, for example, that might be appropriate, or at University of Chicago that might be appropriate. So I think I would be looking and seeing if there's anything there. We obviously, these docs that you go to know people, but we also know people in these hospitals, so we can connect you if there was anything that you thought was particularly interesting. And I think I might go into somebody like Lang, having done a little bit of research to see what trials might possibly be appropriate. And feel free to tap us up if you need some help with that.
I had it brought up one other point I forgot to mention. If I can just get, or you want to move on, I guess.
Well, I just want to finish my thought, actually.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I saw that pause.
I would be asking Lang, how he would prioritize these 4 options and any more. And I definitely would get an opinion from him on the card trial as well, and see what he thinks. I mean, one of the reasons we keep pushing this card trial is because it was represented in this interview as being a kind of watershed practice-changing trial, right, Len? And so I think it's good to to get the opinion of some of these really good GU med oncs out there as to whether that's just Cora Sternberg's opinion. And it seemed to be Alicia Morgan's opinion too, really, didn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. And you know, so I think it's worth running the card trial specifically past him and seeing what he thinks. It is one of the options anyway that you have. So let's just tie up with whatever Larry wanted to say.
Oh, so Ken, I see they mentioned Zytiga as an option. I mean, there's no to just jump to Zytiga. It doesn't seem to cost much in terms of just see if it can produce an immediate effect. But I was also thinking about some trial that I've been looking at, which was, are you locally metastasized or you have metastasis distant?
Dennis, you have distant metastasis, correct?
Yes, I do. Well, I initially did have distant metastases.
Yeah.
What's showing up on scans now is only in the pelvic area.
So like Len, I mean, in a way, I'm wondering about that. I've been seeing these darolutamide trials that are right now for local metastasis, like whatever they call that, oligometastasis, or what, forgot the term. But you were talking about the lymph and the maybe even, I don't know how far the spine is considered. If that's something that you could talk about, the darolutamide trial, it's sort of like if you can go right to Zytiga and then maybe darolutamide and then go into the option between the clinical trial or chemo. I don't know. Maybe
That's
a lot
a
of
good
work.
point. I did ask that question of Dr. Morris on Friday. I said, what about darolutamide? And he said, well, that's in the same family as enzalutamide, so it's going to have the same type of effect.
Not necessarily, but that's not necessarily true because we know that darolutamide works in the face of some of the variants that block enzalutamide.
Right.
So, yes, he's right. It is in the same family, but it might be worth trying somebody on darolutamide, even if they'd failed enzalutamide, just like it's worth trying an abiraterone, because it's a more improved drug. I can't say more than that because it gets too technical for me, but I do know that darolutamide will work where enzalutamide has failed. Len, do you want to comment?
Well, let's clarify that it appears in preclinical studies or prostate cancer cell line studies that darolutamide is effective against certain androgen receptor mutations that cause resistance in enzalutamide or with enzalutamide. So to my knowledge, this hasn't been demonstrated clinically in people yet.
Fair enough. That's why I always ask Len. I'm more optimistic.
By the way, I don't know if you guys covered this before. I just took a quick look at that IMMU 132. That is a chemotherapy drug. It's what they call a topoisomerase inhibitor. It's like a topicide, which we're familiar with. So I don't see the point in entering a phase 1 or phase 2 trial with a chemotherapy drug when you've already got cabazitaxel or docetaxel. Why take a risk with the toxicity on something that's not even proven yet?
Good point. All right.
Very good point. Yep. Thank you, Len.
It's a pleasure, Dennis. And just call us if you need any help in prepping for any more of these meetings. We have somebody else who's come in on the telephone that we haven't identified. Who might that be?
It's Peter, and I'm only going to be here a short time.
Okay,
I just
Peter.
left a doctor's appointment. I'm waiting for Susan to show up for lunch. So I'm already
Okay.
here. I'm just listening in the parking lot.
Okay, we'll come right to you. And we had a new name for about 10 minutes. I think they must have just been lurking, called Sven. But Sven was here and Sven was gone. So,
Carl Foreman has also joined us.
oh, Carl Foreman joined us too, huh?
Hello, forgot about the different time.
Okay.
Peter, I'm going to mute you for a moment because you're echoing.
Carl, did you need any time today?
No.
No. Okay. Peter, did you need to talk about anything today?
I could give you just a couple of 2 minutes. I just met with a number 2 oncologist here.
Okay.
Interesting conversation. He's a very young guy, younger than my sons, I believe. And we had a nice chat. I mean, I just wanted to meet him and feel him out. His response to me, I mean, he looked at my stuff. He'd done his research. He looked up Dr. Turner's stuff. And his take was that I'm about to embark on pretty aggressive treatment. You know, he doesn't think early chemo is necessarily proven and worthwhile. He thinks that the side effects would be too bad. And so his question is, why not just stay on androgen deprivation, you know, until things progress or whatever. And I mean, those things have crossed my mind, but I think I'd rather buy into the early chemo thing and see where we go. But so anyway, so I don't think I'm going to use him. And the other doctor I met with last week will cooperate with the Turner regimen and me, and that's kind of where I am.
Well, you know, I guess we would refer him to Stampede and some of the other trials that really show that earlier use of chemo is advantageous. He's living in the dark ages a little bit.
No, he knows that. He knows that. You know, he quoted the studies, but he didn't feel it's definitive enough. He didn't feel the bang for the buck was enough, and he's just, you know, he questions whether I'm ready to take the downside of chemo. And so anyway, we had a good discussion. It was okay. I could tell he's a lot more conservative, as is the guy I'm going with, but he's willing to go out on some further out in the limbs, taking directions from Dr. Turner.
Len, you have any thoughts for Peter?
Yeah, I'm kind of sympathetic to the hormone approach rather than the double chemo, because in Stampede, if they're still adhering to the original conclusion, they said chemo was better earlier for high volume, bulky disease, which Peter doesn't have. So, you know, I understand why this other oncologist is proposing, you know, a less toxic approach.
Yeah, but Peter's, you know, the issue for Peter is that.
But he's still castrate sensitive, right?
Yes, I'm still sensitive, but I have progression. I have more lymph nodes, and I've got all this stuff now in my peritoneal. So things are on the move.
Yeah.
How are you doing on the abiraterone? Do we know if it's working, Peter?
Darolutamide. I'm still on darolutamide. I got another month of it, and it's working. Yeah.
Hard to argue when something's working.
So he's not saying give up the darolutamide and just go on androgen deprivation. He's saying stick with the hormone therapy drugs.
Right. Switch over to enzalutamide or something like that at the end of the month when I run out of darolutamide or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, but we were just talking. I mean, I'm not going to use him as a doctor, but I got his opinions of how things are going. So when you talk about bulk, Len, you're talking about distant metastasis, yes? Because I don't have a prostate anymore. I mean, I had bulk to begin with.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm talking about where you are right now. The Stampede showed that, I think it was Stampede, I always confuse those, or Charted, showed that early use of chemo was effective for guys with distant metastases and I thought, or high volume disease. So in other words, a lot of cancer. I didn't specify where.
Yeah. So, we need to look up the definition of high volume, but it was more than just one or two bone spots is what they were saying.
Yeah.
This is Carl. Peter, I thought in some prior discussions you mentioned that you were possibly considering going on to the PARP inhibitor because you were BRCA2 positive. Was I correct or incorrect?
Yes, chemo first, then PARP inhibitor. You can't take them together. I'm somatic BRCA2.
Right.
Okay. I mean, just so that, that since I've been on olaparib for over a year now, my PSA has been undetectable. I have not had any chemo treatment, but, obviously everybody is treated differently.
But you're germline BRCA, right, Carl?
Yes.
Well, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if you're germline or somatic for the PARP inhibitor, though, because the PARP inhibitor is addressing the cancer cells. I mean, there are times when it can matter, but I don't think it should matter. I mean, what's more interesting is Len's situation, where the BRCA showed up 4 years ago, and now it didn't show up, Len?
Well, like 6 years ago.
Years ago.
But yeah, and the latest biopsy of my bone showed no mutation. I had 7 mutations from my prostate biopsy, and now they did the bone 5.5 years later, and there are no mutations. Now, I went. It's not my turn. I could talk about this a little more when the other guys speak, because I just saw a new oncologist today, and she may have explained why that's possible.
Okay, well, we'll come on, but let's keep moving along. So, Peter, thank you for the update.
Yeah, I just want to throw out. I think Turner is concerned about the peritoneal spread, which is very unusual, and that surrounds all my organs. So I think this is probably driving the chemo treatment because it's an unusual spread for me and for anyone. He's only seen one other person with that kind of spread, and so I think that's a factor there that's driving the chemo as opposed to just staying on ADT.
Thanks, Peter. Good input. Okay, so let's move on to someone we haven't heard from. How about let me see here. How about Peter Monaco? Because I see that Jerry has paused. Peter, why don't you give us your questions?
Oh, hi. I was just giving you a brief update. I'm 5 months into the Garrelix treatment, working with Sloan Kettering, Dr. Shao. And I've been undetectable since the first injection. I've got 7 or 8 more to go. That's I think a total of 13 months. And that's where I'm at. So I just wanted to catch up and say hello and let you know how I'm doing.
Well, it's great. It's really good that it's working for you. We probably should recap that this was after your PSA started to rise a little bit in 2019, and
Right.
that you had an RP back in 2015, correct?
Yeah, I had an RP 2015 January, and had to follow that up with the radiation, salvage radiation, because it was determined that I had a couple of lymph nodes in the pelvic area that were affected. This was unfortunately not picked up in my pre-surgery scans because they were just borderline and they missed it. So when I came back with a whopping 1.5 PSA after the surgery, it was only 5.4 going into the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I went to Sloan at that point after the surgery, and they immediately suspected that something was up, and that's when they ordered an MRI, and that was when again a couple of these lymph nodes were detected. So I had the radiation 40 treatments, as I recall, done simultaneously with Lupron, and that produced a 4-year complete remission, which unfortunately ended in August of last year. So, and the PSA started to rise. I was getting checked every 6 months at that point, and when I went in for my PSA test in August of 2019, it had gone from 0 in February to 0.79 in August. And then, that's when I went to see Dr. Shao and started getting lots of PSA tests every week or so. And it was jumping up pretty quickly. It landed at 1.45 after only about 6 weeks. And that's when I started on the Garrelix. And since then, it went back to undetectable. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to stay with this and hope for the best. I think in the meantime, I will reach out to the other oncologists that you mentioned, that maybe I may want to do some shopping, get ready for the next steps when they do occur.
How are you handling the Thermagon shots?
Well, yeah, I just that was the other thing I wanted to mention to you. As it turns out, I am now, after Dr. Shao ordered a bone density scan after I mentioned to her last time I saw her, that I was dealing with some back pain. It's legacy back pain from arthritis and scoliosis related, but she ordered a bone density scan, and sure enough, I have osteopenia, and I am now on Fosamax. Other than that, I'm handling the Garrelix okay. A little fatigue, but I've been going to the gym, try to battle that fatigue with staying as active as I can. And really, that's the worst of it. So if this stuff worked for me long term, I can handle it. I just hope it works a long time. That's all I could say.
One thing I would say to you is that the Fosamax is really a pain to take, and
yeah.
I was borderline osteoporotic, and so they gave me an annual infusion of Zometa. You might ask her if you could get a shot of Prolia or Xgeva every so often rather than taking the Fosamax. Fosamax, by the way, is different to Prolia, and Prolia I'm just just going to mute there. Thank you. Prolia and Xgeva are the same. Fosamax is the same as Zometa, and there's one other as well. There's a Fosamax drug that you can take once a week. I think it begins with an A, but I can't remember the name of it now.
Yeah, actually, Rick, that is the one I'm on, the one that starts with an A, and I take it once a week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I take it. You're supposed to take it first thing in the morning, drink it down with lots of water, wait at least 30 minutes before you eat anything, and not to lie down for the first 30 minutes.
Okay, well,
so you take it first thing in the morning and drink it down, with a
yeah, that's not so bad. The
So that's
Fosamax is the one you take every day, and you have to go through that routine every day, so it's a real pain to take that one.
Oh, no. I thought what I was on was a Fosamax a generic, but I suppose it's something different, so sorry about that.
Yeah, it's just a different dosage.
I just wanted to clarify, Dr. Zhao, is that Dr. Zhao at Sloan Kettering?
Yes, yeah, the Basking Ridge
so
facility.
I mean, you were talking about shopping around, and I know that Rick may recall my story with Dr. Zhao, who I met a year and a half ago, and when I did not proceed with her, but like 2 months later, after Rick had mentioned to me about Dana Rathkoff, I called Sloan Kettering. They switched me to Dr. Zhao's office, and they insisted that Dr. Zhao could answer all of my questions, and they would not allow me to have an appointment with Dana Rathkoff.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know why they I don't know. She doesn't have the greatest personality. I think a little bit is because English is her second language. So I think the way she expresses herself sometimes is a little bumpy because again, I think it's related to her English skills. I mean, she obviously is fluent, but sometimes she says things that you have to kind of think about what she said.
I agree.
But I don't know. I mean, does she have a bad reputation? I mean, I can't imagine she does working there.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I wanted to switch, and I was told I couldn't.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're not going to get a warm and fuzzy from her. There's no way. But she seems to know her stuff, and I'm satisfied with the result I have right now. But I will, as Rick suggested, that you gave me the names of some other oncologists that I might want to consider, and I've got those names, and I may start doing some interviewing and whatnot as I progress down this path right now.
Yeah, and they're people that are not necessarily at Memorial Sloan Kettering, Carl. So.
Yes, right. Now, Dr. Zhao, she works in both facilities. I did double check that. She does work in their Basking Ridge facility, and she does work in their New York City facility. So maybe they've changed their model, because a lot of people thought that they operated sort of like as a franchise, and that their doctors were either in New York or Basking Ridge or wherever. But that's not the case. They do swap them out, and she does have hours in New York City, office hours.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the same case a year and a half ago, that she was in both locations.
Right. So
okay,
that's all I have to say. I'm again right now. My status is stable, and hopefully stay that way for a while.
Good. Well, the exercise is really important, especially if you've got a little osteopenia, and that weight resistance exercise can make a huge difference. So try and get into a program where you're doing weight resistance work 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, I actually have a trainer now at my local Gold's gym, and really helping. And I'm probably going about 5 days a week, between 4 to 5. And I also do walking on the treadmill 30 minutes. So I'm trying to do my best to, and doing exercise in the treadmill. I mean, all that does help to combat the fatigue that comes with the ADT. I think if you feel tired on this ADT and you allow yourself to, get in your recliner and just throw on the old TV, you're gonna fall asleep. But if you get up and move around and get active, it's sort of like recharges the battery. It's amazing, but that really does seem to happen.
We've been saying that for a long time on this show. So, you heard it here first. Talking of which, guys, you got to get on to great nonprofits and write some testimonials for us. Not one person has done that yet this year. Take you all of 5 minutes to do it. So please go to great nonprofits and just write something nice. We need to get our 10 or 12 endorsements for the year, and we're not even off home plate yet. So I keep asking. I hope somebody will do it who hasn't done it before.
You got it.
Can boardies do it?
I guess boardies could do it. Yeah, if you've never done it, they don't know you're a boardie unless they do research. Somebody does some research, they might have a problem. Sylvester, Sylvester, you can do that. You can go on and write something on great nonprofits for us. You're muted. You're muted. You have to turn your microphone on. Go on. Yeah.
I'll do that. I was hesitant, but since you pointed it out, I'll do it.
Thank you.
I'll get on it tomorrow.
Okay, so you're going to be the first one, and we need a few more of you to follow suit. And you'll see some of you, there'll be names on there who wrote for us last year that you'll recognize, and have written some nice things. You don't have to write nice things, but it would help if you do.
That brings up
So
a question, Rick.
What I wrote last year is not good for this year?
Every year you have to get 10 new endorsements to hold on to your I don't know if they have to be new. I'm not sure if somebody who wrote last year can write this year. We could try it and see if they count it.
Well, that was my question. I was going to ask that very same question. Because I did write one last year.
Don't know the answer. But to be sure, we can get 10 people who didn't write, and then we can see. Or we can get a couple of people who did last year, and then we'll see if they count them. And if not, we'll be out beating the bushes again. All right, I'm going to move on to Jerry Pelfrey in warm and sunny San Carlos.
So true. A little warmer than you, Rick.
I know.
I've got they're really basic questions. Since I just had my first year anniversary, the 6th of February, my latest tests showed that I was a little anemic. And I was wondering if anyone had any ideas on how to treat this anemia and get rid of it. I know iron will do it, but I mean, what are there any suggestions out there?
I'm going to let Len have a go at this one. I just want to put my 2 cents in, which is that it's not unusual because it is a very known and quite frequent side effect of being on androgen deprivation therapy. So we kind of expect it. I'm not sure how anemic you are. If it's marginal, one good thing to do is aerobic exercise. That definitely helps to populate the red blood cells. And obviously, iron is something. And Len, what other thoughts do you have for ADT-driven anemia?
Well, I agree with you there, Rick. ADT causes your hemoglobin and hematocrit to drop. There are bone marrow receptors for testosterone, and your testosterone's repressed. So you're not producing as many red blood cells. As far as iron goes, unless you are actively bleeding, there's no way that you have low iron. I mean, you could ask your doctor to do an iron level test, but if you're not bleeding, there's so much iron in everyone's diet that that's not going to be a cause of anemia.
Okay, well, I'm just looking for maybe somebody else that was anemic, and it's not that bad, Rick. It's just low, maybe by 2 points, you know. So I was just wondering if anyone had any other ideas out there, more nutritionally, you know. That's all on that. So it sounds like everyone just treats their own, and we just live with it because it's part of the ADT treatment.
Let's ask the group who else has found themselves low and has found a way to deal with this in a more complementary way than with drugs. Anybody address this?
This is Carl. Yes, I'm also somewhat anemic. My doctor told me not to worry about it because it's not low enough to be of concern or an issue. But if I were to address it, it could have some potential negative side effects by trying to improve the anemia, so that I should live with it. And it is part of the reason that I'm having fatigue, as most of us have as well. But I was told to leave it alone.
Yeah, I don't know if this would help or not, but leafy green vegetables are oftentimes suggested diet-wise to address sort of low red cell count. Anybody have any input on that one?
Yeah, leafy greens are high in iron. But again, unless you have an iron deficiency, it's not going to, all the iron in the world isn't going to change your anemia. What happens is if your hemoglobin is slowly dropping over a couple of years from ADT, your body adjusts to that. And it's not typically a cause of fatigue, but it's more, unless you're like below 10 on your hemoglobin, which I doubt. You're probably around, what are you, around 12, Jerry?
Yeah, right in there.
Yeah, it's more likely the ADT drug itself that's causing fatigue, not the slightly lower hemoglobin.
Right. Okay. Well, that was just, like I said, simple question for me, being just 1 year. The other thing I've noticed is that my body is extremely sensitive to cold. Does anyone else have that experience?
Definitely me.
And me.
That's why I'm in Florida.
Well, that's why I'm in Mexico.
I can't tolerate the cold.
Yeah. No, I've noticed even down here, where it's, you people would say this is mild or almost summer. But boy, I get cold when I didn't used to. So glad that, Len, you're another buddy in that.
Did you say you're in
wear
Mexico?
more clothes.
Are you?
Yeah.
You can include me in that list too. I'm cold all the time also.
Ah, wow. Okay. Yeah, Len, we're about now with the really new good 4-lane highway. We're about 4.5 hours south of Tucson.
Okay. How's
yeah,
life
right on the
down
Sea
there?
of Cortez.
You like
I'm
it?
sorry?
You like life down there?
Love it. Yeah, we've been down here 13, going on 14 years.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Other than the
Problem being,
you took in Prescott for your treatment, or the 9 months in Prescott for your treatment, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the one problem. We're seriously thinking of having to move back to the States because of my cancer. But right now, I'm doing pretty darn good. So, we're just kind of, well, we haven't even really been back home a month. So, we're taking it slow. I have just one more thing for you people that I found very interesting. And I forget the name of the association, but they're studying nutrition and different produce and the effects with cancer. And there's a couple of good videos out on YouTube by two brothers, Dr. Lee, L-I, and it's, I believe it's Kenneth, and then the other one is William. And they go through and they actually show you scientifically with the microscope and that on the little blood vessels that cancer spreads out. And then they show you after, I forget how many, but one was strawberries. And it cut those small fingerlings in half. Now, they didn't say how much or how you should eat or anything. And, of course, lycopene, tomatoes, just about obliterated it. So it's just two videos that are I found interesting this afternoon. Just for your point of information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a little bit about your exercise habits. What are you doing?
What am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm walking outside right now. I have a treadmill also, but it's so nice. I walk, let's see, today I walked 1.5 miles. And then I do have a nice gym here that I can work out at. But since I've got my treadmill, I actually, when I was in the States, I bought one of those big balls because a couple of my exercises are to lay on the ball and with my stomach, and then on the sides use 5-pound hand weights and just lift them up and down to help my shoulders and my back where I have a lot of the cancer. So I've got a whole routine, and it's actually, Rick, it actually came from that physical therapy center up in Prescott. The manager and I sat down, he asked me about my cancer, and I told him every place it was, and he developed an exercise routine for me.
Perfect.
And it does it for my shoulders, my spine, and my pelvic girdle. So, and I do that as many times a week as I can.
Excellent. Okay. Just checking in and a good report.
Okay. All right.
Anybody have anything they want to ask of Jerry before we move on?
Wanted to make sure that Jerry did not move to Mexico because of Donald Trump.
Well, we were down here a little before all that happened.
And you still want to come back?
Not necessarily, but it's, well, first of all, Medicare and my insurance won't cover me down here. Although they do have abiraterone down here, and it's about half the cost, but that doesn't help me since I'd have to then pay out of my own pocket. So there are some pretty good. We've got a very good hospital in the Sonora capital, which is Hermosillo, and they actually are one of only 100 hospitals in the world that are certified by JCHO, and JCHO is a certification company that does all of the hospitals in the U.S. So it's a good hospital, but the problem is, you know, you got to pay it out of your own pocket. So that's, you know, there are some reasons to get back to the States, even though these doctors at this hospital in Hermosillo are all bilingual. Too bad we can't get Medicare to allow us to live in other countries. But anyway, yeah, we're going to have to move back at some point.
All right. So let's move on. First with Ken Anderson to wrap up anything that we didn't talk to Ken about when we were talking with him and Dennis McGuire, and then to Len. So Ken, is there anything that you would still like to raise that we didn't touch on?
You know, I must admit I don't think there is. Can you think of anything, Rick?
No, I mean, we, you know, it was very similar to your situation, and you know, we talked about the card trial pretty extensively. So, one question I do have for you is, who's going to order your abiraterone, and where is that situation?
You know, with the email that I just sent the local med-onc, she's going to order it here. She's going to call me later tonight or first thing in the morning. I think she'd rather do the scans first, but I'm going to insist on just starting abiraterone. You know, get off it. Just do abiraterone. Get on the next drug.
Right. So have you pretty much decided that you will do abiraterone before you do Jevtana?
I have decided that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. Well, I want to give you a commendation in front of everybody that you got off your butt and you got this resolved in about 3 days after we spoke last weekend, or 4 days. Good job.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Yep. And I think that, as you see, if you take it in hand and you push yourself, that truly you are your best advocate.
I'm still going to get the scan. I do think the reason for the rejection from my insurance company is that, you know, I wasn't 6 months out. So I'll probably travel to MD Anderson in mid-March, and get a PET scan, which the insurance company will then pay for, and find out, you know, whether or not the disease has moved much from my last scan. But I'm still going to do abiraterone first.
But with the so this was you should tell folks that your Axemin scan was turned down, correct?
Yeah, because it was 5 months, 5.2 months for my last scan, and Blue Cross Blue Shield said I had to wait 6 months, and/or progression. And I think there could be a case if I pushed it hard that, hey, I've had 7 months of PSA rises, so there's definitely progression, so I should be able to get the dang scan here locally. And I still might try to do that. I don't know. I'm going to work on that.
Okay. All right. So anybody have any questions for Ken? Okay, let's get a little bit of an update from Len, who has been to see a new
medical
Oncologist.
oncologist. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to be able to find down here in Sarasota, Florida, which up in New York, you know, they consider that a medical backwater. but I found a Harvard Medical School grad who did her residency at Mass General, fellowship at Dana-Farber, you know, before coming down to Florida. And to top it all off, she remembers Dr. O fondly from her days at Dana-Farber. So this was like a perfect choice for me. Really sweet young lady, I would say in her 40s. So I mentioned to her the bone biopsy. She asked me about, have I done gene analysis, mutation analysis? And so I told her that I had 7 mutations with Sloan Kettering, and now with the bone biopsy, there was nothing. And she was a little surprised, but she said, well, it could be because the bone biopsies, usually the specimens aren't as high quality as a prostate biopsy would be. So I don't know. When I get back to New York in May and talk to Dr. O, we'll see what he has to say about it, what his theory is. But that was her take on it. And so the only other thing there is I got an Xgeva shot, and she switched me from Lupron to Eligard because that's what her office has. You know, they buy in bulk. They're both Leuprolide, same dose, just different formulation. So that's about it. That's my update.
Ken, the most recent sequencing was done by FMI, correct?
You're talking to me, Len?
Len, yeah, sorry, did I say Ken? That's because I got Ken thing in front of me. I meant to say Len.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yes, Foundation Medicine.
Well, it is, and the original sequencing was done by MSKCC from the prostate tissue.
Exactly.
So
I shouldn't say nothing. The bone biopsy did show MED12, MED12, but they said that it's nothing actionable and there isn't much known about MED12 or what it contributes to prostate cancer growth. I was MSI stable, so I guess that's good news. Mutation burden was low.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That's certainly yeah, we certainly like that.
So also this Dr. Guanchil, her name is down here, and she said you still might be eligible for olaparib some point down the line because you did at one time, you were positive for BRCA2, even though your bone biopsy did not substantiate that. So we'll see.
Well, I'm glad you've got somebody, you know, given that you're going to be spending a third to half the year down in Venice going forward, it sounds like you have a good team set up, and that gives you good peace of mind. So you don't get concerned when you go down there that you're in good care. And, you know, there's no reason. And also, I'm sure she'll look forward to speaking to Dr. O. So that's also very, very positive.
Matter of fact, she said she was going out to San Francisco. I think it's a GU ASCO conference. Yeah. And she said she'll probably meet him there.
Yeah, it's this weekend and starts on Thursday and goes through Saturday. And I had a couple of people ask me if I'm going, a couple of the farmers, and it would have been a good time to just touch base and see some of the docs. But you know, I could still go for one day, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I mean, I had thought about going in just for the day and just to do some glad handing, basically, and show our face. Maybe next year I'll do it. I can stay at my buddy Dave's, and I'm sure I could, you know, figure out a way to get in. But I haven't had any sort of. I've had people who said, "Oh yeah, we'd love to see you, or maybe we can go out," but I don't think I'm going to do it. So, and the meeting is well reported. So, for those of you who follow Mike Scott on Prostate Cancer International, I'm sure you'll see him report most of the significant trials are going to get released and reported, results from trials that are going to get released and reported. But there'll be a lot of action starting on Thursday, I'm sure. Anybody have any questions for Len? So one thing I did want to mention is something that Len and I have discussed, and I found this out last Friday morning. So I was working with an old friend of mine who I knew from my days in Romania, and her daughter lives in Palo Alto, and she's been pretty successful startup. When I was in Romania, she was an undergrad. She just applied and been accepted for undergraduate at Cornell, and that was like 20 years ago. Anyway, my friend Carmen was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in 2010, and then in 2018 she had endometrial cancer. And from the little I know, I was aware that that was an indicator that she might have Lynch syndrome and some sort of MMR repair. I always forget what MMR stands for. What does MMR stand for, Len?
Yeah.
Out of my mind.
Mismatch repair DNA.
Mismatch repair, thank you. Mismatch repair DNA. And at the time, we had a couple of conferences with, with Professor Bill, God rest his soul, because I was very concerned that radiation treatment might have adverse effects. Because we knew that Bill had had a heck of a time, and he had that BRCA. He was BRCA positive. And eventually, and it took a while, we got her to decide, we got Carmen to decide that she would do a color test. And she did it when she was visiting her daughter over the holidays, these recent holidays. And last Friday, they released the results to her. And by the way, if you do a color test and you don't order it through your doctor, then the way they release the results to you is through the genetic counselor. And they require you to do a genetic counseling session and give you the results at the same time. If it's ordered through the doctor, then you can still get the genetic counseling session, but the doctor gives you the results. So she was in Romania, I was here, and I was on the call with the genetic counselor. And one of the things I learned, which is relevant to a lot of you guys, is that there are two mutations that they believe are associated with radiation damage. Now, these mutations sometimes appear somatically, and they're much rarer germline. And of course, with germline, they're going to have a much greater impact on radiation. I mean, ironically, it's probably good if you've got them somatically because it makes those cells more sensitive to radiation. If you've got them germline, it's a bad situation. And the two mutations are ATM, as in what you get your money out of when you go to the bank, ATM, and TP53. And some of you may have found TP53 reported. And sure enough, I went back and looked at my notes on Professor Bill, and Professor Bill had germline TP53. And that's probably why, you know, Bill always thought that it was related to his BRCA2 mutation. Maybe there's some effect there, but the TP53, certainly if you have it germline, you've got to be very, very careful with radiation. So I thought it would be just worth mentioning that to those of you who are on the call and those of you who are going to listen in. And I am trying to get Foundation Medicine to give people a heads up if they show an ATM or TP53 that they need to do a little bit more investigation. Because if we can avoid people getting horrible radiation damage, I think we're doing a good thing from radiation treatment. Any questions?
You know, Rick, do you know when you say radiation, are you talking photon or proton or both?
I don't know that there is, I don't know we know whether there's a difference. I'm just talking any form of radiation. I don't know whether proton minimizes the damage or not. It's
okay.
a good question.
All right.
Is something that probably would somehow or other need to be studied. But it's, you know, I don't know how they'd ever study that because you'd have to submit somebody with a germline ATM or TP53 to a treatment that's going to cause them damage. I don't know how you'd know. I guess scientifically you can hypothesize. Lem, what do you think?
I don't think it would make a difference. But just to retrace what you said, Rick.
Sure.
So poor Bill, he had both TP53 and BRCA2 germline?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Hold on a second. I think so. He definitely had TP53 somatic. And he definitely BRCA2. Okay. And I never saw his germline test. But my guess is that since he had TP3 somatic and he had all that damage up front, I bet he had TP53 showed up on his BRCA, on his germline. Because he had horrible, he probably, Bill had the worst radiation damage of anybody that I've run across.
Yeah.
You know, the problem is that if a mutation shows up somatic, the only way that you're going to know if it's germline is by doing a germline test. Because they cannot tell from the test whether it's germline or whether it's somatic. So he showed up BRCA2 and TP53 on his FMI test. But I never knew to ask him whether it showed up, whether TP53 showed up.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of TP53 germline. I would think you wouldn't survive too far beyond the womb, because that means every one of your cells is incapable. You know, that's a suppressor gene, tumor suppressor gene. If you don't have that, it seems to me you'd have an awful lot of cancer early on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, she did mention she mentioned that the ATM and TP53, so they must see it occasionally. You know, maybe it depends on the variation of TP53, Len. Because all these genes, one of the things that I'm learning, and I really don't understand that well, but all of these genes come in multitudes, the mutations come in multitudes of varieties. So a BRCA2 mutation can come in a number of different types of varieties or forms, sub categories. So for example, just because Carl is BRCA2 germline and Bill was BRCA2 germline, those may not have been the same mutations. So, but it's a good, you make a good point. You make a good point. I don't know. This is where we need to ask Bill, but we don't have Bill to ask anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right.
Did we get to Carl?
Carl didn't have anything he wanted to talk about today.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess I could say something. I mean, I actually did read something about the fact that most of us cancer patients do experience some degree of pain and side effects. And, you know, I've always had a concern that some of the pain that I'm feeling may or may not be indication of progression of disease. But on the other hand, it seems that, you know, it's not uncommon, and that maybe we should just be happy with taking painkillers.
I guess the real issue when you have a systemic disease like cancer is to separate what is cancer related and what is not cancer related. And I have no idea how you go about doing that. I'm sure most of the guys on this phone have long-term chronic pain. The question is how much has that pain been exacerbated since they were diagnosed with their cancer? Anybody want to comment on that? Somebody's going to have a remark on that one, I'm sure.
Well, that would be me.
Well,
Jerry, go ahead, Jerry.
And then Jerry. Ken, you go first.
You know, I can honestly say self-induced pain is one thing. You know, I'll go out and ride my mountain bike or go for these monster hikes and my feet will be killing me, or I'll crash and have, you know, scrapes all over myself from cacti and the such. And those are self-induced pain. And I can live with those, and sometimes I wear them proudly. The ones I have a hard time living with are the ones that are caused by therapies, cancer-related therapies. Having no testosterone, you know, I have random pain from drugs that I take, I think. You know, I wake up in the morning and I don't have the pain, but as the day progresses, the lack of testosterone, I end up with, you know, muscle pain from here places. So I can honestly say cancer, all in all, I feel pretty good, but I do take, you know, a leave in the morning to help me kind of feel good. So I have a hard time. That's what this under 60 group chat's going to be about is pain. You know, how we address different kinds of pain. Because a couple guys have asked me, you know, is it cancer pain? I say, well, do you feel it all the time? Because if it starts out and it's cancer pain from bone mets, it's not going to be something that you wake up in the morning and it's not there. It's going to be there 100% of the time, and you're not going to get rid of it without doing something to it. So that's only my 2 cents worth. Okay, Jerry, you're up.
well, okay, Ken. I can't do those 26-mile hikes, but I guess, working out. I really think most of my major pain was right between my shoulder blades, and then across the shoulder blades. And I got to tell you guys, first of all, Tramadol. I take 2 Tramadol in the morning, and that's it. That's all I need. But what I take 3 times a day is 25 milligrams of CBD with THC. Although you can do it with just straight CBD, which then you don't have to worry about is it legal or not. But that is what alleviates my pain. And I really don't have a lot of pain that way. And I sleep better. So I'm a proponent of using CBD with that and exercise. I think the combination works beautifully. It does for me, at least.
Who else? Anyone else want to make a comment on pain?
Larry. So my 8:01 p.m. comment is there's the cancer pain, and I think there is the Lupron pain. After 4 years, 4.5, 5 years of Lupron, I really feel like I have a constant, like 4, scale of 1 to 10, 3, 4, maybe now 4 pain. And that's different than just saying it's cancer pain. But it's cancer related. That's the definition that I would have. That's all I had to say.
Well, I mean, this is a great subject, and I think probably something we need to come back and revisit. And I'll certainly bear it in mind, but one of you should feel free to bring it up. And I don't want to shortchange it, but it is 6:02, and we could probably talk about pain and aspects of pain for the full 2 hours if we start getting into it. So I'm going to put this one, I'm just going to shelve it for a while, but please don't hesitate. We don't talk a lot about pain on this call. We talk about treatments, but everybody sort of sucks it up, and you shouldn't necessarily have to do that. And I for one would welcome a greater discussion around pain. Just a couple.
Rick, real quick, just out to the group. I am taking 0.5 milligrams of lorazepam. Now, that all started when I first got on abiraterone, and I think there were a lot of psychological things going on too, but the oncologist in Prescott put me on it. Now that my doctors are in Tucson and that, I just found out that my internist will not prescribe lorazepam for anyone over 65. And I looked it up, and evidently, for people over 65, there's a higher possibility of serious side effects. Has anyone heard of that?
I think they're concerned about it exacerbating or contributing to dementia.
Oh, really?
Memory loss, dementia.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
not just lorazepam, but all of those class of drugs they call benzodiazepines. Valium is in there, Xanax, lorazepam. Yeah, all of them.
And
you can avoid them, avoid it.
And Klonopin, like I'm kind of addicted.
Yeah.
But I think the main concern or the main fear I have is falling. Wake up at night and I'm a little shaky on my feet. I find like I am what they call walling as I go to the bathroom from my bed and turn around. I always make sure that there's a wall close by in case I feel like I'm losing my balance. And it takes like till the first cup of coffee or second, a couple hours after I wake up to feel like my normal security. So I do feel when you take, especially in combination with Ambien, nice combination by the way, but the side effects are a little instability, and that's the concern I think also.
Okay, just a couple of quick promos. The under 60s call is on Thursday, moderated by Ken and Jim Ward. We hope in the wingman seat. And Dennis, if you can make it, we'd love to see you on that call. And the only other thing I want to mention to you is, and this is also news for my boardies, it's almost certain that we're going to be starting a blood cancer group. I think in April is that's when we'll go public. We're going to do a dress rehearsal in March and we'll launch in April. So if you have, anybody that is living with a blood cancer right now, we're lumping them all together. All types of multiple myeloma, leukemia, and lymphoma. Then we should have a website up and running for that within 2 weeks, and they'll probably be able to sign up for the group as soon as we have the website up and running. If they don't see the website up and running, they won't be able to sign up for the group. But I'm excited about that. And the game plan is if we can get it out there and it's successful, then we'll start to break it down into more defined blood cancer groups. So if it's successful, we could start just multiple myeloma or leukemia or whatever it is, or maybe even a young cancer survivors blood cancer group or what have you. But I just wanted to mention it to you in case you know anybody that might fit into the category. Oh, and it will also it will include caregivers and anybody that's loved ones, anybody that is involved with somebody who has a blood cancer.
Rick, can you update the calendar for the U60? I do not believe it's on there.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm glad you said something, because I don't have it on Facebook. I didn't add it because I missed it.
Yeah, we will. Well, I'm gonna talk to Jackie. I've just added it to my Jackie to-do list. And you know what? You're probably right, because I added it and I probably didn't add it to the calendar. So I will try to add it. I will add it to the calendar, or Jackie will.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that out, Jake. Definitely. Okay. All right. What would I do if I didn't have my minder there in Baltimore? I don't know. Oh my gosh. Okay. We will see you all next week on a Monday. Monday the 19th, is it? I don't know. 18th? What's next Monday? Somebody just gave me, look, I have a new calendar here to put up on the wall. So
Monday is the 17th.
17.
Okay, see you on Monday the 17th, and stay warm, stay dry,
Okay.
and we'll talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.